Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk us through the latest things and then have a bit of a Q&A.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Great. Uh, so I thought just start with the kind of major announcements this week. 225 Bitcoin added to the treasury, just shy of the next target at 2050 Bitcoin in the treasury. What's that addition? That's like a 12% addition this week.
Good question. Yeah, I'm
From
not
where we
sure.
are,
I don't know that math actually.
roughly. So still stacking, still stacking. And the kind of main bit of news was the change to the ATM. So
Yes.
yeah, I kind of want to go into the ATM a bit more today because it's all the news and stuff that's come out. MSTR with their new rule set last night, um, and people are hypothesizing on how it could evolve and change, and lots of people kind of don't necessarily know how it actually works at the moment. So can we dive straight into like how the ATM works at the moment, like the rule set?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the way it works is, and obviously this is executed by Shard, um, the affiliate of Tennyson there. But the way it works is the price the price is set from close price on the Aquis market the prior day. And so that becomes the threshold where Shard can't sell any shares above or below that price threshold. And that's applicable to all three markets, right? So Aquis, US OTC, and the Frankfurt market as well, obviously converted into the local currency, but that's the price threshold below which they can't sell any shares on those markets. They sell shares. Additional fun fact here: they sell shares directly into each market, all three markets, and the rules are really simple. The way it's structured, and this was the collaboration of Andrew and Shard to come up with this very elegant structure here. But they can sell up to 20% of the volume for the day, and that's it, right? So that's the extent of the rules, to keep it nice and simple. So you can't sell below the close price from the prior day, and they can sell into all three markets, and the cumulative volume can't be more than 20% of total volume globally for that day.
Thank you. Hopefully that clears up for people how it currently works. MSTR last night they released an update or kind of a explanation of how they intend to use the ATM on the common stock. Not below a 2.5 MNAV, and then sort of in graded amounts of use up to a 4 MNAV, and anything above a 4, they're just going to hammer it by the sounds of things. My words. Um, what do you think of that? Do you think that's something that SWC could move towards?
Yeah, I was sending Andrew some messages about this as soon as that came out. We haven't had a chance yet today, because of the time difference. I was up for that and he wasn't up yet to sync up on that. But MetaPlanet has sort of introduced a similar idea. I believe their threshold is 3x MNAV, that they either unofficially or officially don't sell below that threshold. Basically, I think it's kind of common sense, and this is sort of being crystallized into policies. Strategy setting those kind of bands is interesting. It's perhaps more prescriptive than we want or need, or at this point in time. I think because we're young, it's still a very good idea for us to remain flexible. And the reality is, like, if we've had massive MNAV compression, below what I think is, where we should be. I think, we've gotten to a territory where, based on the amount of Bitcoin yield we've been able to deliver over any time frame, it's kind of a screaming value. So, if this ends up being kind of the low end of where MNAV is for the foreseeable future, aka if this is kind of like the bottom of our MNAV compression crash, right? Then we would expand from here, and then where we're currently at is still in the range of what strategy says is fair game. And I think because of our size and the amount of Bitcoin yield we're able to deliver, we should be, I think, over that 4x threshold, like, most of the time, for the foreseeable future. I would think, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the math that I see. So yeah, and I think it's a good idea as you mature as a Bitcoin treasury company to start to signal that what your accretive range is. MetaPlanet's been doing this for at least a quarter. If you go through their presentations from May, I think, they have a great slide that shows their MNAV over their entire history, and then a window that says, like, this is where we intend to be accretively diluting people, which has like a bottom end at 3x. And I think that's kind of the mental model that I have and that we should have of, over time that window probably drifts down as MNAVs compress as you scale, but think of it as a window where, like, if we're above, strategies can kind of put out this number of 2.5. Like, if you're above 2.5, it's incredibly attractive. And especially if you're over 4x, and I think we'll probably be over 4x for more often than not over the next year. Maybe it ends up being something different than that, so don't count on that. But I think that's kind of what we've seen from MetaPlanet, and if we continue to remain on the same sort of trajectory, that's how it would probably shake out.
Yeah, and you mentioned in that about remaining flexible, and we'll go back now to the announcement that came out on Monday about the first change to the ATM with regard to the funds being released, etc. Can you explain how it was working and now what it's going to change to?
Yeah. So we had established that we were going to sell through a defined amount of shares before then updating the market on here's what happened. Andrew came up with an improvement, in part from hearing the community's desire for more frequent updates on that, and I think more frequent receiving pounds from that, to have it be a set 2 weeks. So we're gonna take stock of what's been sold over a 2-week period through the ATM, and then report that to the market. And in doing so, we can then collect those pounds, rather than having to wait. We had the first round of it was 7 million shares, and we were going to wait until however long that took, and then report to the market. Part of it was the way that first clip shook out. There was a tiny amount that hung over into the next day, and so then we had to sell that, and then report on that at the end of the day. So there was it was suboptimal how it kind of it kind of made us lose half a day of ATM selling, basically. So this way, it's a lot cleaner. I think more predictable. I think it takes care of that, hangovers of a prescribed set number of shares into, how many days is that going to be? And so, yeah, I think Andrew came up with a really good solution here. And I think it's also important to, let the community know, we'll be iterating, and we're listening to you guys very intently. If you have ideas, collectively, particularly if there's consensus around ideas, we get a lot of ideas, but we have to filter out a lot of them too. If there's consensus emerging around an idea, we're particularly open to thinking about it, and we're going to be iterating on ATM structure, ATM style instrument structure. It's not an ATM; it is an ATM style instrument. We're going to be iterating. We're going to be trying new things and trying to optimize how we're doing everything. So, expect that, we will continue to make little changes here and there as we try to improve everything.
Okay, let's move on to some of the Q&A stuff that's come up from the community. I think you may have answered this on Anders' show on Wednesday, but I think, for maybe people who haven't watched it yet, or maybe people just want to hear it again. Preferred stock becomes pertinent again today with MetaPlanet just announcing that they've launched their preferred.
I haven't even gotten to read that today, so I'm looking forward to that. I've known that's been coming. It's been obvious, right, through the hints that they've been providing in the market. And occasionally I'll exchange texts with Dylan, and he would just hint around it too. And I was like, okay. Yeah, so it's really cool that that's happening. I think it's very interesting how strategy came up with this not that long ago, like 7 months ago now, maybe 8. Then when they launched Strike, and then now they've rolled out 4 or 5 of them. So it's a fast-moving space, and I think right when these came out, the assumption was, well, only strategy can do this. Like, you have to be in strategy's position in terms of balance sheet and sheer scale for this to make sense. But MetaPlanet started sniffing around it quite quickly, and I think they realized, it makes sense earlier too. You don't necessarily need to have 600,000 Bitcoin, but you do need to have quite a bit of Bitcoin. I think that's important for Smarter Web investors to know and think about. I think if you zoom out a bit to what's the value proposition to potential investors in these instruments, you're saying, look, we have an incredible balance sheet, extremely over collateralized, and we would like to issue debt effectively. And if you're interested in getting 8 to 10% a year for your fiat, we will promise to pay that, and look at our incredible Bitcoin balance sheet. Like, this is how you have confidence that we will be able to do that. So you have to have that balance sheet in order for the debt market to be at all interested, or to trust that, to have a sort of, to deem you creditworthy, right? And MetaPlanet's there, I guess, and we're on our way there, but I don't think we're there yet. The other part of it too is, like, when you're young as a Bitcoin treasury company, when you're young and moving fast and delivering a lot of Bitcoin yield, and the MNAV reflects that, right? Like, it should price in that expectation of how much yield can be delivered. That's the market doing its magic. If so long as your MNAV is high, the most valuable thing you can do is be issuing equity, the most accretive thing, because really anywhere over 3x is incredible for the accretive issuance of new equity, because you're buying Bitcoin with it. And the math on a 5x MNAV that we have in our investor deck, if you're at a 5x MNAV and you issue 10% more equity, and you use those proceeds to buy Bitcoin, that's 36% increase in Bitcoin per share, just right there. So like 10% dilution, 36% net accretion from that. So it's ultimately, and Saylor's kind of nudging us to use the terminology of, it's just an accretive transaction. It's not an accretive dilution. Yes, there's dilution, but then the accretiveness of it nets it out. It's so great that it nets out to being just accretive. So it's an accretive transaction. When you're in a high MNAV, like that's the best thing to be doing. As you mature as a Bitcoin treasury company, your MNAV will compress, and then higher torque instruments become more important. Strategy has sort of faced that sort of existential question, I think, of like how do you deliver Bitcoin yield when your MNAV starts to get towards 1? And the solution is these instruments, preferred equities. They're the better form of debt market fuel, rather than just like issuing ordinary bonds or convertible bonds. These are a better version of that. So anyway, all that to say, like that's the end game. I think that's the goal of where every Bitcoin treasury company is trying to get to, but it's path dependent. You have to get a large, clean balance sheet before you're creditworthy enough for it to be interesting to potential, debt investors. And we're very much in that stage of still building that balance sheet. And frankly, it's the more exciting part too, of like we can move faster and we can grow faster because we're small. And yeah, I kind of have this mental model of like a 2-stage rocket. There's, for a Bitcoin treasury company, going from zero, from like MetaPlanet, like Smarter Web, you start on the launch pad. That first stage, it's equity. It's equity issuance, private placement, and ATM style issuance. And then you get to a high enough point in terms of your Bitcoin stack is big enough that the MNAV compresses naturally, and you have to switch to a different fuel source. You got your second stage rocket, and that's going to be debt market capital, the bond market, fixed income market, and preferred equities are the best way to do that. So that's kind of like that's how I view things. That's how Andrew views things. That's where we're moving towards, but we're still very much we're still in the early stages of that first stage of the rocket, which is a great place to be, frankly.
Thank you. What size does the stack kind of need to be for the people in the back that haven't heard this before?
So that's part of what's so cool about it is like, we don't know, right? Like strategy was, I don't know, 500,000 Bitcoin before they launched these. But then now MetaPlanet, 17,000 Bitcoin, they're launching them. You could probably do it with 5 or 10,000 Bitcoin. I think you probably can't do it below that. And yeah, we'll see. I think there's going to be, and there are other factors too that probably play into it. Like, first and foremost, how clean is your balance sheet? Like if you have structural headwinds from, existing debt or strange covenants, like some of the Bitcoin treasury companies that are popping up are trying to take some shortcuts to get to scale, which, is a risk, and maybe it works out for them, or maybe it creates structural headwinds that they have trouble overcoming, that could quell their flywheel, or stop it from ever forming. You can't have that, if you're trying to issue preferred equities without being at strategy's scale. So, these other things play into it too, of like, at what point in time does it make sense to launch them? We don't know. I think it's very notable that MetaPlanet is able to do it at a much smaller scale than strategy. And basically that means we don't really know how small you could be and have it work. But there's lots of other variables that go into it too, like, how much demand will there be in your local jurisdiction for these products. The UK happens to be pretty good on that front. I think there's a lot of demand for high yield, because interest rates are lower, and the way that retirement accounts are set up, you're paying taxes unfavorably on some of these things if you're doing them internationally in particular. So anyway, there's a lot of things that go into it. I don't think it's anytime soon. I think Andrew has he's kind of put out his aspirational timeline, and I think the community should not expect that certainly any sooner than that, and probably not not as fast as Andrew would like to do it too. But I think the more important thing is that equity issuance right now is what we should be focusing on, because it's the most valuable thing we can be doing at this life cycle stage. And yeah, so we're mindful that in parallel we have to build that out, but we're also mindful that the best thing we can be doing is just executing on the equity issuance strategy right now.
Thank you. So the next question was kind of a bit open. I'm not sure you can answer it, but I did notice that you commented on a post from MNAV, who I think is an SWC investor, but mainly hails from Capital B community. Why are people selling? And I wanted to sort of share the graphic that he shared, that you commented on.
I like this topic. I have a bunch of thoughts.
You can start talking. You can start talking.
Yeah. Why are people selling? Well, that tends to happen with any asset that has a massive rally. Oh yeah, this is a cool graphic. If you think about what happened with Bitcoin treasury companies globally in over the last 3 months, there was quite a massive expansion as people got excited about, oh wow, there's going to be potentially more MetaPlanets all over the world, and it could happen fast. And it got frothy, right? It got ahead of fundamentals. And I think importantly, some companies, got the benefit of the doubt when they had not yet proven their ability to execute on fundamentals. And then of course, when you have that kind of mini bubble, really, the tide ends up going out. People who have made lots of profits, they sell, or they some to some extent get a little panicked trying to lock in some of those profits. Some people who bought the top, they panic thinking they made a mistake, right? And they sell. And in Bitcoin world, we've seen this. This is what happens with our 4-year cycles. And so I'm very familiar with the sort of sentiment and psychology that I've been closely watching for more than 2 cycles in Bitcoin world. And it's a dead ringer right now for how that feels and what plays out. But yeah, in Bitcoin, coins change hands, right? You have panic selling, you have profit taking, for whatever reason, the individual market participants want to sell they end up selling and being moved to sell during a downturn. And those coins in Bitcoin end up finding new holders who have a forward expectation of their own about what Bitcoin will do going forward, and they're starting their journey, and they're expecting to hold for some amount of time until who knows what happens. And so you reset the holders, and I think the same thing happens with any stock or any asset that rapidly goes up. You have a process that plays out the same way of people get too excited, blow off top, gets a little frothy, and then there's a contraction, and that contraction moves people to sell for a variety of reasons. Shares change hands, and they find their way to new holders who are starting their journey with their own individual theses about what's going to happen, where this thing is going to go. And they're not thinking about, oh, am I going to, I just made 100x, is it all going to go away? They're thinking, I've taken a fresh look at the fundamentals here. I like the team. I'm gonna invest and hold starting now, right? So that's like just a very organic, natural process that plays out in markets, and it's I think what's been going on here. A few things here of MetaPlanet's 15-month history. If you go back and you look at their price chart along the way, and their MNAV expansion and contraction, they had like 4 of these cycles in their 15-month history, where MNAV expanded and then contracted, and it kind of looks, it's always a little different, but it always looks kind of the same too, of like a heartbeat on a chart, right? Where you've got this expansion, contraction, and then diminishing volatility as it kind of hones in on some consolidation level. Meanwhile, they kept stacking Bitcoin. They kept adding Bitcoin per share. And then at some point that forces the consolidation to break out to the upside. That's been the story with MetaPlanet for its 15-month history. And I think that's such a big part of why I'm extremely excited about what I'm seeing at Smarter Web. And when this model is done right, what happens is that that NAV per share, that Bitcoin NAV per share, just keeps marching up, and you can stay at a consolidation level for quite some time. But so long as that NAV per share is increasing, like at some point it forces the market to reassess. Like, wait a second, we're approaching the level where it's like 1-to-1 with Bitcoin, and yet they're delivering a ton of Bitcoin yield. How do we value this asset, this company? And what we've seen with MetaPlanet is inevitably that pressure breaks out to the upside and starts a fresh cycle of price discovery as the market tries to figure out what is the value of MetaPlanet. And they break out to the upside in a big way, and the same pattern plays out over the next few months. So like if you go back and you look at the Bitcoin chart over 16 years, and every 4-year cycle, because of the halving schedule, it ends up looking a lot like what we've seen in the last couple months with Smarter Web. Just on a 4-year time scale with Bitcoin is kind of like a 4-month time scale for MetaPlanet, and it's kind of looking the same way with Smarter Web. It's the same mechanics and psychology playing out on a 12x faster time scale, and that's exactly what you want to see too, right? Like that's a healthy digesting of a big upside move as the fundamentals continue to improve under the surface, and make it possible for the next move. So anyway, why are people selling? This is markets. This is what has to happen to digest a big upside move. and it's also what makes it possible for everything to reset, for shares to end up with holders who have or who are looking ahead to the future and thinking, I'm going to hold this for some time, or some amount of performance, rather than looking backwards and saying, like, I need to lock in my gains. Right. So I think we're resetting, investor expectations, investor sentiment and metrics, and that's all part of the process. And so then just taking a look at the fractal, really, of like how Bitcoin's price discovery plays out over time, and how that manifests, and then looking at MetaPlanet and seeing, well, it was pretty much the same thing that has happened on a 12x faster time scale. And then you look at Smarter Web and see we're in the first 4 months of our life, but it's kind of looking a lot like those two examples. And the mechanics under the surface are improving because Bitcoin per share has kept increasing. So connect all those dots in your head and figure out what you think.
I mean, not financial advice, but buy the fucking dip. Okay, thank you. After an okay 3 months since IPO, what are your expectations for the company's performance and strategic direction over the next 3 months?
Yeah, obviously can't say anything specific, but what I think is most, I love going to the analytics dashboard on our website, and there's different things you can see in the 6 charts we have there. One of those charts is Bitcoin held, right? And if you just take a look at that chart, you'll see a stair stepping up and to the right, growing exponentially. That's awesome. And then if you scroll down, yeah, there we go. On the right there, that Bitcoin held chart is very healthy, and I think it's the result of everything that Smarter Web does, everything that Andrew's built, everything that we're doing every week, all the conversations we're having, all the infrastructure we're building out with, individual, raising money through individuals, through institutions, with the ATM style instrument, and that all adds up to that chart. And I think it is itself a representation of how Andrew runs the business, the cadence by which he executes, and we all contribute to that. And I think you can make your own assumptions about whether or not that work ethic and that approach to executing will continue. Right. So each individual has to make that assumption for themselves. And then you scroll down to this MNAV chart. That's the other one I think is most instructive, because this will bounce around. This is just a reflective of sentiment, in my view, for Bitcoin treasury companies as an entire sector, and also for the particular company in question. But right now we're at the lower end of MNAV for our entire history, and you can ask yourself, will we stay there, or will we not? And the contrast, the diptych, I guess, of those two charts, I think is very helpful, because one of them is going up and to the right, and that's the fundamentals, and then the other one is market sentiment and is down and to the right at the moment, and you can ask yourself if that'll remain. So I can't say anything about specific outlook for 3 months or whatever, but I think but what I can say is take a look at our track record and ask yourself, what builds that track record, and are those pieces still in place? And the answer to that is yes, very much so, and we're adding to them.
Okay, What are the biggest challenges facing SWC with regards to regulatory slash political dynamics in the UK? And I don't know if you've seen this because it happened like 2 hours before this, but the FCA have officially okayed crypto ETNs in the UK.
Oh, good. Yeah, I hadn't seen that. For quite some time, we've felt that investors deserve that. Um, a, Investors deserve an instrument that tracks Bitcoin cleanly, and that's great. Um, our view is that Smarter Web was never a substitute for an ETN, because it doesn't track Bitcoin cleanly. There's volatility that's layered on top of it, as we've seen with the MNAV chart. Um, and ultimately, they're trying to do different things. Like an ETN is trying to give pure exposure to investors, pure Bitcoin exposure to investor portfolios. And what we're trying to do is grow Bitcoin per share. And that's different, right? So our goal is compounding Bitcoin, and ETN's goal is straight up clean Bitcoin. So yeah, that's fantastic news. I think it's also a sign that, between the lines, we think that the success of Smarter Web may have influenced or perhaps slightly accelerated that inevitable, um, a regulatory shift was bound to happen, but it's possible that Smarter Web helped, which is really cool if that's the case. Yeah, nothing more to say on that. That's good news for UK investors.
Um, okay, are you prepared for a bear market? You've mentioned the 4-year cycle. And do you think you can continue to raise capital in one?
Yeah, yeah, I think we're in, I mean, in some ways, there's no way to be ready for a bear market, right? You don't know when it's going to hit or what it's going to look like or how long it'll last. But you can certainly be more ready than others. And I think we're in a fantastic position in terms of that. At the moment, we are 100% equity, right? And there's no debt on our balance sheet at all. We're constantly evaluating, adding, um, attractive debt, but it has to be very attractive for it to make sense. At the moment, we've got an incredible balance sheet. It's 2,050 Bitcoin and no debt. That's great. um, and that makes us puts us in stronger shape than other Bitcoin treasury companies that have taken on debt, and especially those that have more exotic financing structures. That there is an approach to financing Bitcoin treasury company that involves giving discounts to institutional investors, sometimes several times discounts, right? Like order of magnitude discounts in some cases. And the problem with that is that those institutional investors are immediately in profit and are going to take profits probably. And that creates structural headwinds to getting the flywheel going. And that would probably be exacerbated in a bear market, right? Where if you're an institutional investor, you got like a 10x deal, better take some profits, right? Like if things are moving down, you're going to be dumping, and that's just the incentive at play for that institution at that point in time. We don't have that because Andrew feels very strongly about having a policy of no discounts for any investors, even me. I paid the market rate when I bought shares, and Andrew too. When he buys shares, which side note I think is really cool. Like that's what you want to see, by the way. If management is thinking, like in the investable landscape, the thing I'm most bullish about is the company I'm working for. So when Andrew looks behind the couch cushions and adds a few more shares here and there, it's a good sign. But anyway, going into a bear market, it's about relative strength, I think, and I think we've sort of seen that over the last month too. Of this MNAV contraction has been really tough on all Bitcoin treasury companies, but if you look around, it's been tougher on some. And those charts don't look like they're shaping up with consolidation. Some of them haven't found they don't resemble a bottom at all. And that may be part of the story here too, of like who are those sellers, and are they still in profit, and are they taking it, and where's their at what point are they no longer in profit? So anyway, like we're in a little mini bear market right now for Bitcoin treasury companies, and Smarter Web is continuing to improve its fundamentals during this bear market, right? Like we're still in a high enough MNAV that it makes sense to just keep doing what we're doing, and we're raising funds through private placement, our ABBs, and also through the ATM style instrument, and we're emerging stronger. Assuming this is a mini bear market, and things sentiment improves after this, then we come out in a position of even looking relatively stronger than our the other alternatives in the UK in particular, and really globally. It's about making sure that you're continuing to execute in a bear market and improve fundamentals, and we're doing that, and others are not able to do that. And I think that's quite something that it's notable. In a bear market, there are things we can, in a Bitcoin bear market, if we face like a 70% drawdown or something like that, there are other levers we can explore to continue to deliver Bitcoin yield. I mean, one thing you can do is sit on your hands. That's the minimum, right? And we won't end up doing that, because we will find things that make sense. Debt becomes more attractive if Bitcoin's down 70%, sort of paradoxically, or counter to what you'd expect, that's when debt becomes more attractive, especially fiat debt at that point in time. And if you can get long dated, if you can get like a 5-year ordinary bond structure in place, that's actually the time at which it's most attractive and most accretive to shareholders. Convertible debt would also be attractive at that point in time. In a bear market, if we're sitting on a treasury and trying to figure out how to deliver yield, that's when covered calls or naked puts, the way that MetaPlanet does, could help generate income that allow you to buy Bitcoin. And then, Strategy put out a slide yesterday saying that like below 1x MNAV, we would consider, buying our stock. And that's interesting too. So there are things you can do. We haven't had to get smart on them really. And I don't expect to have to get smart on them, so long as the market is continuing to evaluate what's the value of Smarter Web when they're delivering this much Bitcoin yield, and that I think is our best ally, right? Continuing to execute at an aggressive pace. It makes it so that buyers step in, and I think we've seen that with Smarter Web in over the last month. Buyers step in because they start to think, wow, this is screaming value given the fundamentals for this company around this MNAV, right? And some of the other companies haven't had those buyers stepping in because they don't have the same track record of delivering Bitcoin yield. So yeah, those are my thoughts around bear markets.
How big an issue is key man risk? Like, what systems are in place?
Yeah, I saw that comment too, and it's funny to me because I think that's part of why I'm here. um, like Andrew alone running a Bitcoin treasury company. There's key man risk there. I'm here to help Andrew. I'm here to be his number two, and I think that greatly reduces key man risk right there. I'm very much on the same page as Andrew about how he's running his business. I love how he approaches all these issues, and what the community is not seeing is how frequently we're talking, how much I'm learning from him about the business, about how he approaches these things. And culturally too. Like I'm trying to sponge up how best to run a business in the UK, and learning from Andrew's values. I think it's less of a norm in the US to care a ton about no discounts, but I've seen now how important it is in the UK context. Andrew's adherence to that, how much importance he places on it, resonates tremendously with UK investors, and that's a critical pillar to Smarter Web's values, and I see that now. I think you also see Bitcoin treasury companies in the UK that aren't run by Brits may make missteps with regard to that cultural value because it's not native to non-Brits. Anyway, so I'm here to help. I'm here to be Andrew's number two, and I'm loving doing that. And I think that right there takes care of a lot of the key man risk. And we'll continue to build out the team as we scale, and make sure that key man risk is mitigated.
Again, something you may not have seen because it came out today, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a company that decided to downlist from the LSE to Aquis in order to improve their odds at getting the flywheel going. And I'm assuming it was down to not being able to issue shares very easily, and maybe costs. How would a SWC potentially overcome the restrictions that come with LSE when, in that future time when it might happen?
Yeah. For the time being, it's great being listed on Aquis. We like being listed there because there are different rules around headroom, and it's a great place to be a young Bitcoin treasury company. In fact, it's possible that Cell AI, I don't even know how to say their company name, but they may have stumbled into one of the things that we viewed as a bit of a competitive advantage, really. I think in the UK, if you're a young Bitcoin treasury company, the best place for you to be is Aquis. And our view, this is actually a disadvantage to be on LSE when you're still small. And it may be that they're learning that.
Yeah, it comes back to your, phase one is issue equity, right?
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it's not a clean. It's not like stage one booster rockets. You want to be on Aquis, and then stage two you want to be on LSE. It's not a clean thing like that for this topic, but I do think that to get your flywheel going, to get to a certain size and scale, Aquis is the best place. And I think that it's been interesting to me that there's been this race to, people want to be on LLC from the get-go in the UK, and we've been quite happy to be like, okay, Good luck. Good luck, everybody. Because Aquis has been a wonderful place for us at this life cycle stage as a Bitcoin treasury company, and importantly, we think we will grow into a life cycle stage probably in not too long from now, where it may make sense to be somewhere else, but it's path dependent, right? You have to get to that scale for it to make more sense to be somewhere else. And the best place to get to scale is Aquis, in my opinion, personally. And I think that's kind of that's based on what I've been seeing and learning about over the last few months, studying this market. So yeah, I'm not all that surprised that they're deciding to move. And it also, shouldn't surprise people if other companies do the reverse move when they are at a different life cycle stage than where Cell AI currently is with just a few Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Yeah, and in terms of, what are they running from, or maybe running is a harsh word here, but headroom, the restrictions on headroom on issuing new equity are a lot more stringent on LSE. 20% currently per year, and will be increased to 75%. There are things you can do on top of that. Nothing is guaranteed on top of that, but you can. Yeah, and I actually will stop short of saying the things you can do, because we're exploring that, and it's a deep topic, and I also don't want to give anybody any more information about what they can do.
Yeah, keep that IP to yourself. Okay, so penultimate question. Are SWC going to go after the European fixed income market? So not just the UK at some point, but
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. I think that I think that our focus is on the UK capital market. My view personally is like that there will be a major winner in every capital market, and I have to drop in a few minutes, unfortunately. And the UK is a major capital market, and there's a significant portion of the world's wealth in the UK, and I think that's especially true in the bond market, and so home court advantage here matters a lot. Being plugged in, especially when it comes to plugging into the fixed income market and tailoring your products to the regulatory requirements that buyers on the other side of the table would look for and need. So that's going to be our focus. At Bain, we like to say profit from the core. Our core market is the UK. It's where we should be focused, and that right there is enough to grow to 210,000 Bitcoin if we just focus on being the leading Bitcoin treasury company there. That's the scale of what's possible, and and I think will happen for whoever wins in the UK, and we want to be that winner, and I think we're in position to keep executing to become that winner.
And the last one's just a bit of fun. What shampoo and conditioner do you use?
I saw that. In the summer, guys, it's all weird because I swim a couple times a week, and so I get all chlorinated hair, and then I shampoo it, and then it gets all like this. So it's gonna be all sorts of weird here in the summer months, but I don't even know what it's called, the shampoo and conditioner. My wife has that, and I'm just I'm not picking brands there. I'm just accepting.
Well, thank you very much for joining, Jesse. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully see you again in, a few weeks' time.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be great. I like this forum for, this is where the diehards are paying attention and getting their information, and it's an awesome sign of a healthy community. And yeah, I like being able to come and update people on what's going on. So let's do it again.
Thanks very much. Take care, Jesse.
All right, cheers.